Now we will begin the fire life safety portion of this presentation. There have been some changes to the reference standards associated with fire and life safety. Specifically, there's now often 2019 editions that have been specified. In the Chapter 35, that's where you'll find most of the reference standards, the 2019 editions. There's also the California Code of Regulations Title 19, which relates to public safety. That is also recognized as part of the fire and life safety requirements for buildings in California. And it's the National Fire and Protection Association, NFPA 13, the standard for installation of sprinkler systems. There's now a 2016 edition, but of course there are still amendments in the CBC Chapter 35. Most of those deal with design requirements for design professionals. There's also now an NFPA 17A, the standard for wet chemical extinguishing systems. There's a 2017 edition. For NFPA 24, the standard for installation of private fire service mains and their appurtenances, there's a 2016 edition, which is amended in the CBC Chapter 35, similar to the NFPA 13. With regards to the NFPA 25 and NFPA 54, those are the 2013 and 2015 editions. There are some new additions for these remaining references. The NFPA 72 is a 2016 edition, and the NFPA 80 is a 2016 edition. And there's the NFPA 1142, that's a 2017 edition. Technically, NFPA 1142 is not officially adopted in the CBC, but it is recognized as a national standard in the industry. Regarding the fire department's role, there's a document on the DSA FLS web page that deals with the roles and authority of DSA and the local fire authority and the state fire marshal. It would be good to have a copy of it and be familiar with the content. This is available on our website and can be pointed to should you have interactions with a local fire authority on a project in which they're asking questions about DSA's role for the construction on that project. With regards to the 2019 CBC format, there are many of the FLS-related subject areas were reformatted to be consistent with the 2018 IBC. So at first glance, it may appear as if previous code provisions have been deleted, when in actuality they've actually been relocated to other sections or renumbered, similar to some of the other sections already covered. For example, many of the provisions formerly in CBC Chapter 14 related to exterior walls have been relocated now to Chapter 7. With regards to enclosure of atriums in sections 404.6, there's a new exception number 4 that has been added. Specifically, this deals with connecting only 2 stories. Fire barrier is not required between the atrium and the adjoining spaces when the atrium is not required to have a smoke control system. This added exception addresses previous uncertainty regarding whether the usual fire enclosure protection required between an atrium and adjacent spaces must be provided where no smoke control system is required. It's not. From a practical standpoint, 2-story atriums need not meet the enclosure requirements you sometimes see for other enclosure situations. For 503.1.4 in relation to occupied roofs, this directs that the structures enclosing the roof are limited to 48 inches in height, and the requirement does not pertain to those structures regulated by Section 1510, which relates to penthouses and so on. So this subsection needs to be understood in light of the parent section of 503.1, which allows occupied roofs meeting certain criteria based upon the story below or presence of sprinklers, which are identified in exception number 1, or the type of construction and use, such as an open parking structure in type 1-2 construction, amongst others, without the need to include that in the allowable building area calculations that are required in 506. The roof needs the openness in 503.1.4 for this allowance to occur. Otherwise, the occupied roof must be considered in allowable area calculations. Such allowable area calculations are founded in fire hazard concerns and limits based on the building type of construction, occupancy and use, and so on. With regards to marking and identification on rated walls, in 703.7, the marking and identification, there's been no changes compared to the past code. The firewalls, fire barriers, fire partitions, and smoke barriers, and smoke partitions, or any other wall required to have a protected opening or penetration shall be effectively and permanently identified with signs or stenciling. Of course, the overall intent of this is to discourage installation of unprotected openings or penetrations in these rated walls. The requirements for the frequency is the same as before. They're required at 30-foot maximum intervals and minimum of half-inch letters. First, they identify the type of wall, and then the words fire and smoke barrier - protect all openings is required on the sign. These signs are installed to warn workers for maintenance and remodeling activities. A note must be in the specifications or on the plans indicating that this requirement will be met. You as project inspectors need to verify that it has been provided. Continuing on with the marking and identification, so this stenciling is required at all the accessible concealed spaces, and it talks about the wall type must be specified in this identification, and the state, and must state what type of wall it is, and must state that information that was previously mentioned about fire and smoke barriers and protecting all openings. There's also requirements with regards to the text and font that's used. It's minimum 3 inches high with 3-inch thick stroke letters, color contrasting with the background. And we already talked about the spacing needing to be at 30 feet on center and 15 feet from the ends of a wall or partition measured horizontally. With regards to secondary attachment to structural members and fireproofing or fire protection, 704.6.1, secondary attachments to primary and secondary structural steel members must be protected with the same fire resistive material and thickness as is required for the primary structural members. And this protection must be extended at least 12 inches minimum away from that structural member, that primary structural member. If those attachments are hollow and have open ends, then the fire-resistant material and the thickness must be applied to both the exterior and interior of that hollow attachment. We'll talk about this a little bit because of what it seems to imply. These new requirements clarify past uncertainties regarding whether fireproofing was required for these secondary members, and if so, how much, when those secondary members are connecting to primary ones, when the primary ones do require to have such fire protection. Though the section indicates requirements for exposed open hollow members, how this will be practically implemented, specially inspected and tested, remains uncertain for small hollow members. Think about that. It's likely that contractors will elect to simply slap on an enclosure plate or maybe completely fill the opening with fireproofing to get away from dealing with those situations. With regards to vents, 705.2.3.2, sealing at vents required in fire resistance rated exterior balconies or elevated walkway surfaces per section 2304.12.2.6. Any voids that are created at the exterior curtain wall intersections with balcony floors must be sealed to retard interior flame spread or hot gases or other products of combustion. This new requirement has been due to some fires over the last several years that occurred on exteriors of buildings that led to smoke and hot gases or other products of combustion that actually, unfortunately, entered the interior of the building through these vent spaces. Recall that 2304.12.2.6 requires vents 1/150th of the enclosed framing area. So these were through these vents and voids at exterior curtain wall intersections with balcony floors, and this is what led to problems and therefore this new code requirement. With regards to firewalls, there's in section 706.1, there's been clarification regarding the intent regarding penetrations of firewalls. The term complete separation was not intended, in the sense that utilities may still pass through a firewall. Apparently there was application of this code requirement related to complete that wasn't even allowing utilities to pass through in some jurisdictions, and that's not the case. That's not the intent. So this clarification has been provided now. Regarding through penetrations in 714.2 and 1714.4.1.1, there's been some wording revisions. Through penetration fire stopping assemblies to be installed as tested. When it uses that wording as tested, that equals as installed. That's what the intent is here. So if it says as installed and as tested, those must be the same. They also need to follow the same listing as what's specified for the particular product. And of course, following the manufacturer's installation instructions is required. There cannot be any mixing and matching of assemblies to occur. They cannot do that mixing and matching. Regarding membrane penetrations, 1714.5.2 now has a new exception, number 8. This exempts protection for penetrations by listed luminaires or luminaries protected by listed materials tested for use within that assembly. However, if those situations do occur, they must be installed per the listing instructions. So if you have those on your projects, make sure that you have access to what those listing instructions are, which include the installation requirements, to make sure that's occurring for that project to verify compliance. With regards to fire alarm testing provisions, section 901.6.2, integrated fire testing, this is generally going to be applicable when there are 2 or more life safety systems that are interconnected. This is to address the system response that must be verified when required testing of the initiating system is to be conducted. It's intended to verify the response of subordinate fire protection and life safety systems. Testing is supposed to occur, is actually required to occur, prior to occupancy. The hierarchy of testing components or component systems in a complex systems is recognized such that retesting is only required for failed components, not the entire complex system. These are generally going to be seen in high-rise buildings and buildings with smoke control systems because they must comply with the noted NFPA 4 standard, which is the standard for integrated fire protection and life safety system testing. For exit discharge illumination, 1 in 1008.2.3 regarding exit discharge illumination, the entire exterior egress route from each building point of discharge through to the public way to be provided with normal egress illumination. That's something that needs to be provided. This illumination to a public way is not required when you have these 2 items here. First, the building exit discharge is to a safe dispersal area, and 2, the safe dispersal area is illuminated at not less than 1 foot candle at the walking surface. The emergency or secondary power source is not required. These requirements are to ensure that occupants can see where they need to go when exiting a building in a panic situation. The normal egress illumination to the public way is not required if a safe dispersal area exists and has sufficient lighting. Regarding door hardware requirement changes, in 1010.1.4.4, there's locking arrangements that are applicable in educational occupancies. This would be for both Group E and B situations that are educational in nature. These locking arrangements need to allow locking designed to keep intruders from entering a room. These locking arrangements must be capable from being unlocked from outside the room with a key or other approved means. Doors must be openable from within the room. Modifications are not permitted to any listed panic hardware that's associated with these doors, so this locking hardware, and the fire exit hardware or door closers. This is to address some of the sad situations in which there's been some school violence occurring. Continuing on with these door hardware requirements in 1010.1.11, Group E, lockable doors from the inside. This applies to new state-funded kindergarten through 12th school buildings, and this requires rooms such as classrooms, offices, and so on with an occupant load of 5 or greater be equipped with interior locking hardware. It gives the staff the ability to engage the locking function from inside the room without having to open the door in the event of a lockdown. This section reflects requirements contained in Assembly Bill 211, which became effective back in January 1st of 2011. Continuing on with the door hardware requirements, Assembly Bill 3205, which was effective on January 1st of 2019, applies to state-funded interior modernizations of existing K-12 school buildings. The requirement is not in the CBC, but is located in the Health and Safety Code, Section 17.583. This has similar requirements to what we just saw. This requires rooms, such as classrooms and offices, with an occupant load greater than 5 be equipped with interior locking hardware. You can refer to Bulletin 1905, AB 3205 door hardware requirements on DSA's website for further information about this requirement. Again, this gives the staff the ability to engage the locking function while inside the room without having to open the door in the event of a lockdown. The companion section in 1010.1.4.4.1 permits remote operation of the locks. The intent of this bill was to afford the same level of door locking hardware in existing buildings as is required for new buildings. Emergency elevator communication covered in section 30.01.2. There's requirements related to the emergency elevator communication system have been revised. The two-way communication must now be visual and text-based and a video-based 24/7 live interactive system. It must be fully accessible by the deaf, hard of hearing, and speech impaired, and shall include voice-only options for the hearing individuals. There must have the ability to communicate with emergency personnel utilizing the existing video conferencing technology, chat text software, or other approved technology. If you'd like to find out more information about FLS information on our website, you can do so. That provides further information about IRs, policies, and guidelines that will help you with fire life safety inspections.